So I'm very happy to introduce to you Adam James, and he is presenting to us the art of mindful engagement.
Thank you, Jenna. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a vibrant bunch. I was back in the corner. Thank you again, ladies, for welcoming me to sit with you all. It was refreshing to hear just the collaboration, the connectivity that you had, and idea sharing. So I'm deeply appreciative of that, and it makes my job a little bit easier, admittedly, pending I don't slip and fall or do anything outlandish where you're going to be inclined to throw something at me. I know that's often a cliche from presenters. I'm happy to say I've never had anything thrown at me to date. I would like to keep it that way if possible. Again, my name is Adam James. I do motivational speaking, leadership training based here locally in the Naples area. Run a company called Mindful Journey, which you have a few handouts in front of you on. Essentially, it's an online platform centered around mental health, well-being, organizations embedded as an organizational wellness benefit for their team members to have access to recalibrate, to take care of their mental health well-being in an on-demand setting. Before diving into today, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jenna again for having me, for corresponding with me in advance. I'd like to thank Meg Stepanian for passing my name along, and I think Danita was involved with that too, and the board for agreeing to have me. And anyone I missed, I think Daniela was on one of the initial calls, so thank you all for welcoming me and for having me. I'm excited, as I mentioned, because of the just warmth I felt when walking in this room, but I'm even more excited to be with you all today because our topic, our theme to re-energize, to reboot, to refresh is incredibly timely, not just for this group as you're exiting season time and your busy time inevitably, but more so because of what it is that we're seeing and hearing in our world today. There is so much angst and uncertainty. Perhaps some of you in your roles, you're having to redefine your job. As I know many of you are experiencing wait lists, you might be feeling inherent pressures from your GMs, etc., to ultimately justify your salary. And if that isn't happening in your world, just turn on the news or get on social media and there's nothing but doom and gloom. It doesn't matter, and don't worry, this won't be a political conversation, but it doesn't matter which station you turn to or which social media engagement you engage in, there is inevitably toxicity and angst and pain. If you talk to some economists, they say we're in a mild recession. Others say we're entering into a recession. All of that being said, I also think that there's an incredible amount of positivity and optimism and an opportunity to rejuvenate, to re-energize, to find our passions again if they have dwindled. And that's what I'm here to do today, to not only help you get just a little bit better as a marketing and membership director, but to help you live with this mindful engagement. Mindful engagement is nothing more than an awareness of your awareness. We talk about engagement in so many capacities from a standpoint of employee engagement, membership engagement, prospective member engagement. We're probably consistently looking at conversion rates of emails that you send out and how people are engaging, et cetera, et cetera. And although we might be doing an effective job of engaging others, my question to you all is, are you engaged and in tune with self? So many times we operate on just autopilot. We go through the motions and do things the same way day after day after day. And I think David Foster Wallace probably illustrated and most beautifully and eloquently described that through a short fable he shared at a commencement address in 2005 at Kenyon College. This short story goes as such. There were two young fish swimming along in the ocean, and as they start their morning, the day is good and well. And as there's another fish coming the other way who simply asks a question we've all been asked before. Good morning. How's your day? But this fish also asks these two young fish as they're straggling along. He says, how's the water, boys? And these two fish don't reply. They just continue to swim. And the older fish wonders why there was no reply, but he two goes a separate way, and these other fish just go minutes without saying anything to one another, and until finally one looks at the other, kind of dumbfounded, confused, startled, and looks at his friend, his fellow fish, and says, "What the hell is water? What the hell is water?" The fish are in water, unaware of the fact that they're swimming in water, not mindfully engaged with the moment, but just meandering through that motion. Of course, just a fable and a folktale, if you will. I often wonder, and that has left me wondering, how many of us wake up and do the same thing day after day after day, unaware of the environments that we're in. For purposes of today, I want to help you generate and regenerate that awareness, to help you reclaim your purpose, to help you reignite that fire that maybe has gone out. And to get there, we're going to focus on two primary areas. One is passion, and two, very broadly, is mindfulness. Passion. Can you tell when you're talking with someone if they're passionate about what it is that they do, yes or no? Yes. Okay, we've still got attentiveness, so that's a good sign. Not too late in the day for that. Yes. You can undoubtedly tell if people are passionate, typically within the first 10 or 15 seconds of talking with an individual. But the harsh truth, and unfortunate reality, is so few of people live with, work with, or occupy such passion in today's world. There are a number of things that allow you to identify if somebody's passionate: their tone in which they articulate things, how they sit and listen and observe, how they show up, how they sit, again, shoulders back or slouched. There are so many things that allow you to identify that. But again, after life has perhaps beaten us down and kicked us down after a few failed breaks, a few divorces, a few financial difficulties, a few illnesses, a few challenges, we allow those things to steal away and suck away our passion. And before long, we're living passionless. You might be thinking, well, Adam, why does it matter if I have passion? Who cares that maybe my passion has been sucked from me? I can't tell my GM or a prospective member that you should come and buy from us because we've got more passion than everyone. Passion's not a unique differentiator. We can't sell it in the marketplace as something that's going to help us be better than another club. Just because you're passionate doesn't mean you're going to get opportunities and advancement. But I will say this: although passion isn't quantifiable, and you can't go back to your respective bosses and say, hey, this cool speaker today told me that if I'm more passionate, I'm going to get a job raise. Not going to happen. However, if you do deploy more passion, if you do show up with more passion, if you are more passionate, people are going to notice, because passion is contagious. It can't be felt tangibly, but it can undoubtedly be felt from an emotional connectivity standpoint. We want to be surrounded by passionate people. So although you can't quantify and your boss isn't going to say you get a raise because you're passionate, he or she will recognize the passion, the enthusiasm, and inherently you're going to benefit because you're going to be showing up just a little bit differently. It will be able to be felt. The question becomes, well, how? How do we reclaim that passion if it's been lost? As you might be able to tell, I tend to speak with a little bit of passion. Don't worry, I won't jump on any tables today. Well, I shouldn't say that. No, I won't. I promise Jenna. Jenna will be like, no, please. We didn't talk about that in advance. No table jumping. However, as a result of the passion with which I typically speak, I've been asked many times, how do you speak with so much passion? And one instance in particular comes to mind when I was probably 24, 25 years old, early on in the days of my speaking business, and a friend of mine that I'd went to high school with, we hadn't talked in many years throughout college. I grew up in the Pittsburgh area, and then we kind of just lost touch, but he saw one of my presentations online, and he said, Adam, he said, I loved your presentation. I found significant value in that which you delivered. He said, but I've got to ask, how do you speak with so much passion? I don't feel like I can be that passionate about anything in my life. And it dawned on me in those moments, although I was grateful for his kind words, I was frustrated to believe that there was a 25-year-old young man who had just been married, who seemingly had a great career already, was making good money, felt at that age that he couldn't live with, wasn't working with, and wasn't passionate. I thought, if at 25 we feel that, what do we feel at 35? And 45? And 55? And 65? After life has told you that you can't, after the coronavirus, after the politics, after the infidelities, after the hardships, after the bad breaks, after the firings, after all of these things that make up life. What do we do? How do we feel? My passion is gone, we might say. When he asked me that question, I told him the way I'm able to speak with, live with, and work with so much passion is because I have an overwhelming why. An overwhelming why. Why I do what I do is so much bigger than me. If this was just about me, I would have quit long ago. Long ago. I've not amassed millions of social media followers, which sadly I think that's what a lot of people in our world look for today. I've not made gazillions and gazillions and gazillions of dollars, which is okay to pursue, and we should want that and make so much money. But if that was the only objective and the only driving force, I would have quit in 2013, 3 months after I started my business, because I was dead broke. Sleeping in the front seat of my car, parked in a Walmart parking lot, because I could no longer afford a one-bedroom apartment that I was living in Bonita Springs. And I was too prideful and too filled with ego in those moments to seek help or tell anyone, because here I was, having told the world that I was going to live my dreams and fulfill my dreams, and now I was broke. In those moments, I was passionless. I finally, after a few weeks of sleeping in the car, did swallow my pride and ego and jump couch to couch for the next 6 months. During that span of sleeping on couches of friends of mine, I picked up odd jobs. I worked at Wildcat Run. I don't know if Wildcat's represented here. This would have been 2013. She's gone now. We can share the story with her. I was working there for $10 an hour. I took on so many odd jobs like that for so long to try to make my dreams work, to try to make them a reality. And I'm here to tell you, in all of those moments, it wasn't easy waking up with enthusiasm and with passion, but the thing that kept me going is you all. You, not necessarily you individually, because you might be thinking, well, you didn't know me then, and no, I didn't know you, and I don't know you now. But I have made it my responsibility and obligation to try to impart hope and wisdom and encouragement onto people who may be going through something that I and all of us know nothing about. The National Alliance on Mental Illness says that 1 in 5 of us have something clinically diagnosable from a mental health challenge standpoint. The harsh truth is that although 20% of us have something, so if there's, I don't know how many people here, if there's 50 of us here, obviously there's 10 of us who have something going on that others know nothing about. But the truth is, all of us have challenges, even if not clinically diagnosable. We're facing things day in and day out. And if the only reason for why we do what we do is to collect a paycheck, is to get a pat on the back, we're never going to be able to sustain during those adversities. So I challenge you, ladies and gentlemen, just one, I'm with you now, me, Cliff, too. So ladies and gentlemen, why do you do what you do? Why are you here at this MDASF event? Why did you enter into the club space? Why did you enter in as a membership and marketing director? Why do you hang out with the people that you hang out with? Why do you read the books that you read or choose not to read? Why do you engage with the news when you know it makes you upset and sad and angry and frustrated? Why do you engage with your toxic friends who make you feel bad every time you leave them? Why do you engage with the social media platforms when you know they make you feel bad every time you engage with them? Why do you do what you do? We have to be very clear on that, because when tough times come, and they're going to come, It needs to be something bigger than us pulling us. For me, that something bigger is, again, you all. There might not be anyone who needs this message today except one person. And that's what drives me when I feel like I can't drive myself. The recognition that I have the great privilege and opportunity to try to pour hope back into the lives of others who may otherwise be feeling hopeless and helpless. That's what keeps me going. When you look at some of the highest performing organizations in our world today, not just from a profitability standpoint, but from a cultural initiative, they all have very clear visions. They have a deep why, because that's what can help people rally around. That's what allows people to fight through the adversity. There's a common goal and understanding. When I'd shared with my friend, not quite that long-winded of a response, that because I have a why, I'm able to have more passion, he kind of said to me, I wasn't able to see him, but he kind of responded in saying, almost like it was fluff and lip service. He said, well, Adam, that's great. You face some adversity. He said, like you know what you want to do. He said, but I don't have a why. I don't have a purpose. I never had one. And that's the biggest cop-out in the world. The reason we lose sight of that fire inside of us, the reason we lose sight of who it is that we once were when we were a 6-year-old kid who was imaginative and as curious as can be, who was willing to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail, the reason we never get back in touch with that individual is because we never slowed down for long enough to find it. If you want to find your why, you have got to search for it. By a quick show of hands, how many of you have ever misplaced your car keys, your phone, or your wallet? Anyone with me? Beautiful. That makes me feel so human. Sometimes I ask at the groups and they're like, no, I'm perfect. I'm like, man, I'm in the wrong group because I'm far from it. We've all misplaced those items. I probably do it more than I care to admit, which makes me maybe less mindful in those moments. But the reality is when we lose something that is so meaningful to us, something that we can't live without, we will search relentlessly until we find that item. I remember in the younger days, because I know they have apps, and I'm still young. Don't let me I know somebody's going to say, well, you are still young. I am still young, but there's apps and stuff now to help you find your car keys, et cetera, et cetera. But before the apps, when I misplaced things, I would turn couch cushions upside down. I would call my friends and say, hey, we were at this restaurant. Do you remember, did I have my wallet there with me? Did you pay? Was my phone there? I'm asking all these questions. I'm doing whatever it takes for as long as it takes until I can find that item that is so meaningful to me. The problem today with so many of us is that we search until we get tired for the things that are actually meaningful. We search until we get tired, and when we get tired, we quit. When it comes to finding our why, we search for maybe 5 minutes. We'll journal. We'll try to reimagine what it was like when we were a kid. We'll think about what it was like when we had this fire inside of us. But after 5 minutes, it's easier to revert to something less thought-provoking, something that comes easy, like Netflix or social media or television. Now, make no mistake, I'm not here trying to proclaim that we have to be on every hour of every day. I watch TV, I watch Netflix, I use social media. But most people today, and I'm just speaking to you straight here now, and only you know what it is that you do in your personal lives. We work on our jobs until 5 or 6 or whenever it may be, and we go home and we disconnect for the remainder of the night, never taking time to really work on us. And the reason for that is because work on us hurts. It's hard. In the book Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman says that there are really 2 parts of our brain, and he breaks it down very simply. That's what I love about the book. Non-complex ideologies. Very simply, he notes there are 2 systems. One is system 1 and system 2. I told you, pretty easy. And he says system 1 is the part of our brain that when it's activated, it kind of operates on autopilot, if you will. It's a part of our brain that if I were to ask you what 2 plus 2 is, you'd be able to instantaneously say 4. However, the second system of our brain is, when it's activated, causes our pupils to dilate, our heart rate to increase, and for our palms to get a little sweaty. It's a part of our brain that when it's activated, it makes us physiologically uncomfortable. So what do we do when a hard problem arises? When we're immersed in trying to recapture our why, when we're immersed in trying to think about these new member orientations, where we're immersed in trying to create new solutions, when we're immersed in trying to do something that doesn't come as easy as 2 plus 2, what do? We give up. We work for about 5 minutes and then we quit as soon as our brain says to quit. But if you want to make a difference in your life, if you want to change the trajectory of where it is that you are, if you're not satisfied, you've got to dig in and dig deep. You've got to search as relentlessly as you did for your car keys, as you did for your phone, and as you did for your wallet. You can't search until you get tired and quit. You have to search until you're satisfied with what it is that you were seeking. Please don't give up short of that. The second overarching theme that I want to chat with you about today is mindfulness at its core. Mindfulness has a stigma still in our world. Oftentimes when I tell people I run a company called Mindful Journey, depending on the person, I get looked at as though they're, okay, you're like one of these yogis, candles lit, soft music, you're in a yoga pose, and that's not the case. Mindfulness doesn't require any of those items. It can help to have calming music, to be in a yoga pose, to have the lights dim in a quiet place. It undoubtedly can help you get to a mindful state. But mindfulness at its core is really just being where your feet are. It's about having an awareness. It's about being present. It's about shifting your focus on purpose to the now. Our minds are constantly perpetuating all of these thoughts. It's going and going and going. We're thinking about the thing that we have to do, the GM email that we got earlier, our kids that we have to pick up, the illness that we just got diagnosed with, the failed attempt that we had last month, a member who was mean to us. All of these things are constantly going in our mind, and I don't know if this is to be true or not, but I once heard from some data that psychiatrists, psychologists, etc. had conducted that 95% of the thoughts that we have today are ones that we had yesterday. That's pretty overwhelming and staggering, which leads me to believe that we don't have the courage to confront the things that we know we need to confront. We have got to become intentional on being here now. I challenge you to think, and you don't need to answer, but I just challenge you to take a moment to think. Is your mind full or are you mindful? Is your mind full of these past pains, of the worries, of what people think about you, of the hurt, of the abandonment, of the shame, of the guilt, of the stressors, of the traffic, of the weather, of the mean members? Or are you mindful of how it is that you're showing up? To help you live a life more mindfully, I want to offer just 2 solutions for you. One is to deploy, to embody, and to embrace more hope. Hope is a small word with a big impact. But if you say it to the right person, they'll buy in. They'll hear what you're saying. They'll give you some inspiration to help you be hopeful. If you say it to the wrong person, they're going to tell you that, well, hope is not a strategy, and hope is this elusive concept that hope doesn't sell, much like passion, which is true. But my challenge to those people is this. If we get to think on any given day what it is that we do with our thoughts, this might be a little redundant in what I'm sharing, but think about this. We can't control the thoughts that come to us. Our conscious mind, the thoughts that come to us, we really can't control. but we do get to control what we think about what we think about. And I've always been a believer that if I get to think between optimism and pessimism, between hope and despair, why would I ever choose anything but hope? Hope isn't an elusive concept, as I've mentioned. The pessimist will tell you that it's impossible. The realist will tell you it's unattainable. But here I am telling you that we should embrace it every single day, because hope, although not a strategy, gives you something to look forward to. And when our mind is full of angst and worry, and when we feel defeated, and we're feeling hopeless, sometimes all we need is a glimmer of hope. It was interesting because for so long I've believed this. I believe that hope is important. It's gotten me out of dark days. It's gotten me out of dark moments and challenging times. And I was recently having a conversation with one of the guests that I interviewed, one of our 8 features or guest interviews in the Mindful Journey. And the gentleman I interviewed, Dr. Drew Pate, he's the chief of psychiatry at LifeBridge Health up in Baltimore, Maryland. And I asked him, because we're seeing so many, sadly, so many rises in not only the completion of suicides, but addiction with substance abuse, et cetera, et cetera. And so I asked him live with the other guests there, I said, does mental illness cause these things that we're seeing, the substance abuse, alcoholism, et cetera, or do those things cause mental illness? Or is it somewhere in between? And he said, Adam, it's an interesting question. He says, we've got a lot of data on this now. And of course, from his many years, he's been in psychiatry for 30 plus years, Harvard Med trained and obviously credentialed to answer intelligently on this as it relates to what it is that he has seen in treating patients over the years. And he says, ultimately, what we have found is that some people are born with a higher propensity to develop addictive tendencies. In other words, their brain's physiological makeup and their biological makeup make them more, ultimately more likely, if you will, to, if they get addicted to something, to stay addicted. But he says most often what we find is that in extreme cases, when you become reliant on drugs or alcohol, it's due to a series of life events. In other words, we lose our job, we get diagnosed with an illness, our kid stops talking to us, we feel burnt out, we sustain an injury, and these series of life events cause us to show up as somebody who, biologically speaking, we aren't. Which is why, in so many cases, people in his specific healthcare system, I forget the number he'd shared, but of all the people who had taken their own life, who had completed suicide, they never sought treatment. And it's likely that they were suffering in silence. And treatment doesn't have to be grandiose, sitting knees to knees with a psychiatrist or getting prescribed something. Sometimes it's just about having hope. And that's why hope is important. I know we're diving deep, and this may be a dark topic, but we can't avoid the tough topics anymore because there's too much heartache and too much pain and too much defeat out there. And there is someone who you could literally change and save their life by just offering a glimmer of hope to them. And in your own life, you are able to get through things by having more hope internally too. The second thing I'd offer as it relates to helping you become more mindful is to do something every day to take care of yourself. By a quick show of hands, and don't feel obligated to answer, I don't want to put you in too much of a vulnerable position, but how many of you genuinely do something for you every single day? See about 4, 5, 6 hands. It's beautiful. Kudos to each and every one of you. It doesn't make the rest of us, myself included, any less than. But we so often put everyone else before us that we fail to take care of us. I know this has been overused as a cliche, and I'm sure you've heard it 1,000 times, but it can't be overstated in my estimation. And that is, anytime we board a flight today, within the first 10 minutes before takeoff, they always say, secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others in the event of any rough air or turbulence. And trust me, although we might think the FAA and some of these airlines aren't very smart, I think they're a lot smarter in this regard than we give them credit for. Because I'm sure going back, history has taught them somewhere along the line that there was probably an individual who tried to secure somebody else's mask, who was losing air and unable to survive and was unable to assist or help the kid or elderly person who might have been next to them. So when you think about that actual idea of why they say it, it's because we cannot help others if we have yet to help ourselves. If we have not taken care of us, we cannot most effectively take care of the people who we are serving, who we are treating, who we are caring for. So we have to, like these 6 or 7 who raised their hands, be courageous enough to say no to others so that you can say yes to you. In this equation, I know we're taught when we're growing up to be unselfish, and it's an admirable aspiration. It is. I like to think I'm an unselfish person. But there are some incredible non-negotiables in my life. Some incredible non-negotiables. Because nobody knows me like I know me. Nobody knows what my burning desires are, what my pains, what my hurts, what's going on in my headspace when I'm alone. And if I don't take care of me, if I don't say yes to me, if I'm always saying yes to everybody else, if I'm saying yes to my friend who wants to go have dinner at 7 o'clock when I'm tired and don't feel like it, if I constantly tell him or her or whomever yes, I'm devaluing me. The question becomes, for those of us who don't always do a great job of taking care of self, why don't we? You've been knowing that you've wanted to go back to the gym for the past 10 years. You've been knowing that you wanted to eat healthier for the past 20 years. You've been knowing that you wanted to make these changes, yet you haven't made them. And I'm not underestimating how busy you all are. I'm sure many of you are not only in your work lives, but when you go home from work or perhaps taking care of kids or picking up kids or with grandkids or cooking or whatever it is that you may be doing. And whatever answer came to mind when I asked, why don't you take care of you? This might be a little tough to hear, but those voices that are arising are excuses. Disguised as a rationalization to say, no, I've got to be a great mom, a great wife, a great grandma, a great grandfather, which you do, and I'm sure all of you are. But if we're being honest, all of us have an extra 30 minutes every single day. What happens, why we let our foot off the gas, so to speak, and why we don't take care of self and why we use these things as excuses is because we fear the confronting of the thing that we deep in our core know that we want to do and need to do. For example, let's use the gym because that's the elephant in the room. I think we all would love to exercise more. I'm not demeaning anyone who hasn't, and I'm not celebrating anyone who does. I'm just calling it what it is. I think we all know exercise is good for us. And yet so many of us don't do it. And it's because what happens in our brain is we start stacking, right? So exercise, for instance, we feel like we need to go to the gym to do it. Okay, so to get to the gym, we've got to sit in traffic. We got to pack our clothes the night before. There might be somebody who's mean at the front desk when we get there. We're going to be in a room full of younger people who are judgmental, who are taking selfies and are looking at us, and we might look a little goofy when we're doing the exercise. And or let's not forget the feeling that we're going to have when we look at ourselves in the mirror and see the 50 pounds that we put on or the gray hairs or the wrinkles or whatever it may be, and we are mad at ourselves and now judging ourselves, and rather than ever confronting it, we never allow ourselves to even allow that thought to rise. There's a lot of people who choose to stay right where they are And think about this for your own life. And I know this is to be true 100% in my own. We don't like to face ourselves man to man or woman to woman. In other words, at one point, you used to exercise, or you looked a certain way, or you ate a certain lifestyle, lived a certain lifestyle. And then because you've let yourself slip, you fear that one, you're going to give yourself a guilt trip when you actually have to go into that gym and confront yourself again. And two, you fear that you may revert back to this person. So why would I even try this very thing when I'm going to end up being this way again anyway 6 months from now? So all of these things are stacked excuses. And we never end up doing what we know we need to do. If you get nothing else from this presentation today, don't promise me or make a commitment to me. Make a commitment to you. Look yourself in the mirror at the end of every single day and ask one simple question. What did I do for me today? It can be small. And by the way, doing something for you doesn't always necessarily mean healthy. Sometimes it's okay to go and get yourself a sundae or an ice cream cone or something that's going to make you feel better now. But more often than not, what you do for you should be a healthy mechanism or behavior. Because if we're doing things like exercising and eating better, etc., we're inherently going to feel better. Promise yourself when you go home tonight, and if you've got a family who's living with your spouse or whomever, they don't need to hear you ask it. But who cares if they do? If they think you're a little crazy. We're all a little crazy. As Steve Jobs says, it's the crazy ones who change the world. Change the world. But first, change yourselves. The other thing I want to chat with you about mindfulness, and I want to be cognizant of our time, because I know I'm holding you up from the hors d'oeuvres, right? That's what's to come. Two more things as it relates to mindfulness that I actually want to challenge you to think about. So if we can deploy and embrace more hope, and we can take care of ourselves better every single day, we're going to live a life where we have a clear mind, where we are more mindful and not bogged down with so much angst and pain and depression, etc. But I also want to challenge you to think about and be introspective with self right now as it relates to how it is that you show up every day. Much like the analogy or the fable, if you will, that I shared on the front end about the two fish who were swimming along, who didn't understand that they were in water because they asked, what the heck is water? I think some of us show up in our days every day just doing things the same way day after day. And that's a broad statement. And I actually loved walking in here today because I saw the idea sharing. And that's amazing. I don't think that happens in all industries. I think companies need to be doing that more regularly, because to learn best practices from our colleagues who are immersed in different environments is amazing. So kudos to you all for what you're doing. Nonetheless, there still may be some things that we can do better collectively, myself included. And when we're not aware of how it is that we're showing up, when we're not aware of how others perceive us, we end up staying in habit. And if that habit is rooted in toxicity, it can create a disconnect with those around us. So a question that you can ask yourself, I know I'm giving you a lot of deep questions today. This one hurts, trust me. It's not going to hurt you. It might hurt when you ask somebody else to answer it for you. It's a big one. But the question is this: what is it like to be on the other side of me? If you ask your spouse, your friends, your colleagues, people you trust to answer that question about you, you're going to learn some things about yourself that you aren't aware of at this moment. Now, be careful of who you ask, because there are some people who don't have your best interests at heart, believe it or not. You need to get people who you know to be cheerleaders for you, if you will, but people who are going to give you the raw truth. It doesn't have to be delivered with a tone that is aggressive. If they love you, they're gonna package it in a way that delivers the message without you feeling like a complete, mean person or jerk, if you will. But that question, when asked of someone, is going to open up your eyes as to how you are perceived. We always like to think that we got it all together, that we don't make mistakes, that it's always somebody else's fault that there's toxicity in the workplace. It's not my fault. How could it be? Look at me. I got 1 million likes on social media. I just post that picture for everyone. Everyone just loves me. All the members love me. How could it be me? We all have flaws. Trust me, I've asked this question of people. Even from a speaking standpoint, I know I'm still intense. You might be thinking, yeah, you're pretty intense. I know this. It's me. It's me. And my message isn't for everyone. I know that too. But I also have learned a lot about me to help make my message more broadly adopted, if you will, by asking that question of what it's like to be on the other side of me. Because if you think this is intense, I would have been on tables before going crazy. And because of those deep questions, I gained insight about me so that I can more deeply connect with others. We have to have the courage to do the same. There's an old adage in mindfulness that says, in the expert's mind, the possibilities are limited, but in the beginner's mind, the possibilities are limitless. How many of you have been in this industry for 10 years or more, by a show of hands? It's probably over half the room. It's wonderful. That's a good sign. It means you probably like the industry, hopefully, or are passionate about it. But it's also not lost on me that as a result of that, 10 years ago, we didn't have artificial intelligence and things like ChatGPT, which are now coming out. We didn't have the technological advancements that there had been. The member-first software that I heard you all speaking of probably wasn't in existence, and if it was an abbreviated version of what it is today. So as a result of your expertise and experience, I believe, think that our way is the right way. And I've learned this through refereeing. As Jenna had mentioned in my introduction, I do referee. Please don't hold it against me if you don't like referees. Most people don't like us. But as I've advanced through that and have been fortunate to get some opportunities, I've been able to move beyond people who've been doing it much longer, in some instances when I first started, than longer than I was alive. And it wasn't because, well, they like me more, I'm just a nicer person. It was because I began to adapt to the technology that was out there to review my game film, et cetera, to move through what there was now and not hold on to some things from the past because I didn't know the past. So I challenge you to think about your roles and what it is that you do. For those of you 10 years or more, for instance, are you open to the possibilities of what could be, or are you closed by what has been? When we've been doing something so long, we tend to do the lather, rinse, repeat. But sometimes, just sometimes, there's a colleague who comes in who might be 22 years old, who might know 1/10 of the knowledge that you have as it relates to the club world, who could actually drastically change the whole trajectory of your club and the member experience. But if you're not humble enough and willing enough to let go of your ego for long enough to allow them to have a voice, then we all lose. I strive to surround myself with people who are much smarter than I. It's not a cliche. Meg and I are connected on social media. She, the guest that I've interviewed in Mindful Journey, and she's a part of, thank you for being a part of, Meg, are folks. I've had the former CEO, Charles Schwab, the guy who owned the Philadelphia 76ers, Stanford psychiatrist who wrote book Dopamine Nation, all these people who are credentialed out the wazoo. And I'm not saying that for a pat on my back or for a pat on their back. Credentials and resumes aren't exciting to me per se. But I believe, and by the way, you don't need credentials for me to be able to learn from you. I can learn from every one of you in here, and I hope you feel the same from me today. But so many of us are filled with pride and ego that we don't absorb other things. We're just operating with that full mind, never aware of how it is that we're showing up. The last thing I want to chat with you about as it relates to mindfulness is being mindful of the words that you speak to yourself and the words that you speak to others. I won't put you all on the spot on this one because I don't want your peers to see that you speak unkindly to yourself, because I know we all do. But how many of you, you don't need to raise your hand, how many of you have ever said anything unkind to yourself? Oh, we do raise hands. Okay, all right. Same. Double hand. The phrase, it's funny because I think education, there's a lot to learn in education from the educational system, if you will, but I think you're broken in many regards. But it's funny that when we're kids, we all learn certain, ideologies, and it's probably still happening today. I'm sure if you walk into a classroom, there's a teacher that says, "Now, Johnny, sticks and stones may break your bones, but words will never hurt me." Right? Has anyone ever heard that? We all heard that. I think it's a fallacy. I think it's a lie. I think it's BS. Because sticks and stones can break your bones. But darn it, words hurt like heck. Think about the phrase, "I love you," versus "I hate you." There's 3 words, if you will, in that phrase. I don't know if I guess we're going to call it a word in this case. It's a letter. "I love you" versus "I hate you." One changed word in that little phrase, yet when delivered and accompanied with intention and a passion and a conviction and a tone, could make somebody walk around for years and years and years feeling less than and inadequate. Whereas the other one, when delivered with the right intention, tone, compassion, etc., can make somebody feel like they're the most important person in the world. To say that words don't hurt, that words don't have power, that words don't mean things, it's a lie. We have got to be very aware of the words that we're speaking to ourselves. And what happens all too often is we let ourselves off the hook. We let ourselves off the hook with the self-talk. If somebody were to come up to you and say something mean to you and say, "I don't like that shirt on you, I don't like that dress, you're incompetent, you're this, you're that," there's a chance that you would never talk to that person again. True or false? Yet, you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, "I can't believe I look like this now. I can't believe I let myself go. I can't believe I never finished my college education. I can't believe I wasn't able to have kids. I can't believe my kids don't talk to me anymore. I can't believe my husband or wife walked out on me. I can't believe he or she cheated on me. It's because I'm ugly and not pretty enough. It's because I'm not personable enough and not kind enough. It's because I'm not charming enough and not sweet enough." We say all these things to ourselves, and we don't hold ourselves to the same standard that we hold others to as it relates to the things that we allow them to say about us. We have got to stop speaking unkindly to ourselves. Like we mentioned before, when thoughts arise, we can't control what comes, but we undoubtedly get to control what it is that we do with it. When a negative, mean thought comes to you that says, "I'm not this," or "I'm not that," replace it immediately and instantaneously with something positive and uplifting. Something that maybe even makes you feel uncomfortable in your own skin, where you maybe feel egoic and arrogant because you deserve it. You don't have to live this lie anymore where you're not enough. You don't have to speak these unkind thoughts to yourself any longer. We can break free of these limiting beliefs that we place on ourselves based upon the words that we speak to ourselves. I want to share with you one other brief story, and I love, you probably have learned this about me from maybe my cheesy and cliche fish story at the beginning, but there is one other story, also a fable, so that don't go searching for this. This is not a research-based story, but one that I think the message will resonate, as I know it did, it still resonates with me today. When I speak something unkind to me, I recall this story. So the story, as it goes, about a young man who's navigating through the wilderness, and off in the distance he sees an elephant farm. And as he's walking down his path, he's aware of this farm off into the distance, but he continues to see the same behavior of this elephant. He's moving slowly, of course, but in the same circular pattern. And so the young man, being curious, decides to move just a little bit closer to this elephant farm to see what it is, if there's anything that's causing this elephant to go in the same direction. And as he gets closer, he sees that there's a small, tiny pool, no larger than what it is that you might see here, that is rooted and staked in the ground of the center of this area where the elephant is walking. So he moves even closer, and he sees that not only is the pool there, but that this elephant's back leg has a knot tied to it, and a very thin rope, not a thick and strong rope, but a very thin rope tied to its leg, which is attached to this pole right in the middle. And he thinks to himself, surely this large, massive elephant is not being held to this pole by that thin rope. So he has to go find out for himself. He goes in and enters into the area, the barn area, and he finds a gentleman who's wandering around. He said, "Sir, is this your elephant farm?" He says, "Yes, sir." He said, "How can I help you?" He says, "Well, I was walking far off in the distance, and I've got to be honest, something struck my attention because it just didn't seem right. It was an elephant who was going in the same direction, at the same speed, doing the same thing, moment after moment after moment. And as I got closer, I realized that he had his back leg tied to a pole that looks super skinny, and there's no way that he is not able to break free of that. So help me understand why this elephant is behaving this way. Have you trained him? What is happening?" And the farm owner simply laughs, and he says, "Well, it's a question that we've gotten before, and one that's very common. You're right. This elephant is far stronger than this thin rope and that thin pole. But you see, when this elephant was just a baby and much smaller in size and not nearly as strong as he is now, that rope was tied to his back leg, which was tied to that center pole, which conditioned him to believe that he could never break free of that area, because when he tried, he couldn't at that age and at that size. You see, when he was just a young baby elephant, he would try to break free, but we didn't want him to be able to wander off or escape, so he was tied to that intentionally. And he would try and fail, and try and fail, and try and fail. And he would have pain in his leg as a result of trying to escape, because he was tied to this pole. And as he grew older and stronger, he never tried to break free of that circular area again, because life and history had taught him that any time he tried, he'd get pulled back. Any time he tried, he would experience pain. Any time he progressed, he would get hurt. He could never break free of that area. So now you see him as this big elephant, this strong elephant who could undoubtedly break free. And yes, he could break free, but he doesn't believe he can break free. And I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what ropes, what poles, what circular areas have you been staying in as a result of what you believe about yourself from years in the past? The things that people said about you 10 years ago, it's not relevant today. The pain you experienced 20 years ago, you don't have to hold on to it today. You have permission to let it go. We beat ourselves up so much for all that we wish we would have done, or wish we would have said, what we wish we would have pursued. We can't go back and change it. The stories that I love to see are the ones of 90-year-old men and women who earn degrees when they're 90 years old. You want to talk about courage? You want to talk about grit and determination? You want to talk letting go of self-image and what it is that you care of how people may think of you or judge you? To go your whole life and then finally get to a place where you say, you know what? Now's the time to try. That takes courage. You too can do the same. It doesn't matter where you are, where you've been. It only matters where it is that you're deciding to go. If you've got nothing else from this today, the very last thing I want to leave you with is one message of hope, because we did talk about hope. And I don't think we hear it enough. And that's this, that you matter as an individual. You, as an individual, you matter and you are needed. You may not feel like your work needs you. You may even feel at times like your family doesn't love you, that they don't need you, that your friends don't need you. You may feel all of these things based upon experiences, but you do matter and you are needed. You never know how your words, how your presence, how your life can impact somebody else's life. We are so filled with pride and ego as humans that you might touch me in a certain way and impact me in a certain way, and I may never share with you because I don't want you to think that you're better than me, etc. I'm telling you, there are people in here that you've inspired unknowingly to you. And if you were to leave MDASF, or you were to leave your career, or you were to, whatever it is that comes to mind for you as it relates to feeling like you're not worth it and you don't matter, there would be people who would be missing out on an opportunity to have their life impacted and changed as a result of your presence. So please, if you, again, have got nothing else from today, please never forget, no matter where you go, that this crazy motivational speaker guy told you that, darn it, I do matter and I am needed. You do matter. You are needed. Thank you.